Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Spirited Psychology Study Group on Human Beings in Conflict, Challenge for the Conscious Being, where we explore our unconscious to help us enhance our mental health, our spirituality, and our wholeness based on the teachings of Joanna de Angelis. I'm Fabrício Assunção from the Spirit Society of Bournemouth. Here with us tonight is our speaker, Dr. Anahy Fonseca. This evening, Anahy will give us a PowerPoint presentation with the main ideas brought by Joanna de Angelis and other authors. We will have time for questions and a time for us to share firsthand experience related to our study. Now, a few words of introduction about Anahy. Dr. Anahy Fonseca is a psychiatrist and a Jungian analyst for some 30 years has been working in psychotherapy, diagnosis, and research on the relationship between spirituality and mental health. She is a member of the Medical Spiritist Association of Brazil, where she teaches Spiritist psychology by Joanna de Angelis. I now hand her over to Anahy for her talk about suffering as an existential option, seeking the truth, Chapter 8, Suffering in the World. Over to you, Anahy.
So thank you, Fabrizio. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again after the summer of you guys in the North Hemisphere. Hope everybody is rested and to talk about this beautiful and very inspiring text that Sylvia and Bob have translated to us. So I'll just share my PowerPoint presentation. Have you enabled me, Fabrizio?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so I'll just share with you. Oops, sorry. Let me put here. Something happened. Okay, let's go again. Think now it's okay?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Full? It's the full, the slide?
Yeah, it's full screen now. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So as Fabrizio was saying, this human beings in conflict, challenges for the conscious being, and it's a journey of self-discovery inspired by the spirit Joanna de Angelis, who Divaldo Pereira Franco, that has recently passed away, psychographed the teachings. So it's we are going to be talking tonight about suffering the world. That it's in the book Seeking the Truth. Just so. So Joanna says that suffering is a path to spiritual growth. Okay, so let's think of what she's talking and asking us to reflect upon. So she says that the dynamics of life are structured in the experiences that enable the self to be fulfilled. The self, as we have been talking in our meetings, for Joanna, Jung's concept of the self, capital S, is what Joanna says the synonymous as our spirit, but only in psychological terms would be the self, Jung's self, okay? So she's saying that the dynamics of life are structured in the experiences that enable the self to be fulfilled. So we are in a spiritual path here in this material life. right? And everything that we experienced here has a purpose, has a meaning. And Joanna is saying that the purpose is spiritual growth. So, in this sense, the phenomenon of suffering is an inevitable part of the existential conjuncture, constituting a mechanism for valuing inner balance as a safety guideline for the experience of well being. Okay, it's like we are going through some suffering in this material life because, as Joanna is saying, it is a mechanism so that we can value inner balance, right? And have this valuing inner balance as a guideline for the safety guideline for the experience of well-being. So I'm just trying to, okay. So then Joanna says that the illusion of paradise, when she talks about the illusion of paradise in the text that you all can find in the WhatsApp group, okay, for those who couldn't read previously. And then she says to believe in the absence of suffering in the world is an utopia elaborated by the illusion arising from the myth of the paradise of the lost paradise or paradise lost, where everything contributed to happiness, that certainly after experiencing it for a long period, it would become tedious and uninteresting due to the lack of stimuli for new conquests and achievements. Human beings, Jonas says, need constant challenges that allow them to develop unknown resources, which awaken under the stigmas of personal discomfort, pain, uncertainties, and struggles that propitiate new conquests. Okay, we can think, well, but do we need all of that? Well, at this point of evolution of our consciousness, we still need all of that, these challenges. Okay, that's what Jonah is telling us. Sorry. So, the paradox of freedom, she talks about the desire for freedom that all of us have. So she says the desire for complete freedom by itself creates suffering when it becomes impossible to choose only goodness to the detriment of evil, right? We face primeval impulses and hostile circumstances of social coexistence, which remain inherent in both the individual and collective unconscious. And also, organic stability has an expressive relativity, changing at every moment through cell renewal, emotional injunctions, existential and reincarnation factors, producing the inevitable sufferings. Therefore, suffering manifests in physical, emotional, mental, social, economic, and other expressions. So it's a paradox, people, because of freedom, because we have desire for complete freedom, but this in itself creates suffering because we are going to have to choose some, and we are going to have, when we choose something, and Joanna says it's kind of impossible to choose only goodness, sorry, in detriment of evil, because we are going to have to face everything that we call evil in a certain way, or to learn what is good. So when we choose and we want to choose only what we think it's goodness, right? Of course, we are going to have to learn what is not and why we are choosing, right? And we are going to have to face all these primeval impulses that are atavisms, ancient aspects of that are in our inner psyche, okay, from past spiritual experiences. As Joanna says, remain inherent in both the individual and the collective unconscious. So we all share this learning process that little by little teach us teaches us what is real goodness because we have learned what is not. But let's see a little bit more of that so that we can clarify the concepts. Joanna goes on talking about Buddha's Four Noble Truths, okay? She says that observing this suffering, all those sufferings that she talks about, led Prince Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, to reflect that everything in the world is suffering, as we know. The historic Buddha, right? Presenting his Four Noble Truths, studying their causes and consequences, the mechanisms of liberation, and the techniques of integral harmony. So, Buddha, the Four Noble Truths are about the truth of suffering, recognizing that suffering exists in many forms, the cause of suffering, studying the origins and consequences of suffering, the end of suffering, understanding the mechanisms of liberation, and the path to end suffering, applying techniques of integral harmony. So, Buddha discovered the presence of the shadow, which is unacceptable to most human beings. He proposed its understanding and acceptance, working the ego self axis to dilute it when caused by suffering or the suffering created. So, of course, Joanna is looking to what Buddha said and giving her psychological interpretation through the light of spiritist knowledge. I think that's so wonderful that the integration of many knowledges because we search for the oneness within us, the totality within us. So Joanna says it's normal for the individual to ask himself if he is free to choose the way to live only in goodness. And of course, he is soon faced with the answer about the limits of this freedom as an effect of the circumstances in which he transits in the body. So the negative option presents the effect of suffering today as the resource for achieving balance later. The so called evil is a natural presence in the psyche. But let's see here. So, the so called evil is a natural presence in the psyche, like the negative primal experiences which are inscribed in the core of the being. So Joanna is asking us to reflect upon what we call evil, okay, in psychological terms, so that we can stop being afraid to look at our own shadows, so that we can integrate the shadows, understand, be compassionate towards ourselves, so that we can really be compassionate towards our fellow human beings, okay? So she says these experiences define the directions that normally change when pain sets in and the need to be happy presents itself as a matter of urgency. So Joanna says that suffering presents pain and challenges, transformation, So transformation is all about inner change and growth, and also provides in this spiritual development balance so that we can learn future harmony and well-being. So let's go on. So Joanna says that this is where the reincarnation is experiences originate, through which in one existence the errors of the previous one are repaired, transforming into conquest what was previously a loss. Through reincarnation, Joanna says, individuals improve feelings and develop the intellect so it can enrich the self, capital S, so our higher self, and predispose it to true individuation. Many obstacles, however, arise in this undertaking, derived from the shadow and other archetypes that are built during the evolutionary journey. So, in this sense, she talks about the abused child who remains within the being and that continues to need the mother's lap, support, and understanding so he or she may find liberation. So, this is a complex, one of our many complexes, as Jung develops the concept. Let's say our subpersonalities, our experiences that are full of emotions that we are going to be talking in the Congress in September, now pretty soon, in kind of 2 weeks, right? It's one of our, most prevalent, I think, complexes, so much so that Freud all his attention, and when he talks about the Oedipus complex, that it's like the basis of psychoanalysis. So he focused on the abused child, the hurt child within, right? So Joanna says that this is she agrees that it's a main complex that we have to pay attention, because if we don't integrate, if we don't understand, if we don't bring to consciousness, make this effort to bring to consciousness, then it continues to need the mother's lap, support and understanding to be liberated. And she says this liberation only exists in the personal effort of each person or through the lucid guidance of the students of human behavior, as ourselves tonight, who know the injunction of the shadow, so the dark aspects of personality that must be acknowledged, the conflict of the anima animus, the tension between feminine and masculine aspects within, and the dissatisfied ego, everything that has to do with that. So the conscious self that seeks fulfillment through specialized psychotherapeutic process have to deal with the dissatisfaction of the ego, okay? So Joanna says that our infantile ambitions, when she talks about infantile ambitions, she says that while infantile ambitions remain disguised as aspirations of psychological maturation, the sufferings in the world continue to dominate persons in all sectors of society. And here, remember, when she talks about the child within, the abused child within, wanting mother's lap, we can extrapolate, make an analogy that it's a metaphor that she's talking about. For instance, when she goes on saying that our infantile ambitions remain disguised of as aspirations of psychological maturation, right? Because if I think that I'm so important, that I'm entitled to every comfort in the world, and I don't have to care about other people's suffering, then I'm totally, I would say, dominated my consciousness by the abused child, the hurt child, because the child think it is, or he is, the center of the world, at least mothers and fathers world, that for the child is everything, right? That's as I was saying, Freud said, focus his attention in the hurt child, or the child within, the complex of the child, the complex of the mother, and the complex of the father. And he develops the concept of the Oedipus complex. Okay. So, and all psychoanalysis go in this path of the repressions and the repressions of sexuality and so on and so forth. So it's very important that we understand that if the inner child and all its hurt, if we don't pay attention to it, okay, he, she, whatever, then what we are going to do is, as adults, supposedly, right? We are going to remember when we talked previously about the mechanisms of defense of the ego, right? So we are going to repress, we are going to deny, we are going to project onto others, saying that, oh no, I don't have narcissistic aspects. It's just because this and that, because I know what's right for everyone. And I can even, because of these infantile ambitions, have struggled to have power. It doesn't matter the way that I interpret power, but if I keep on this narcissistic aspects within, and connected to and leave the complex of the child to take over, sorry, my consciousness, the ego consciousness, then I will think that all the power in the world is mine, and I know everything, and I know what's best for everyone. And so I will disguise these aspirations, as Joan is saying, as psychological maturation, and the sufferings in the world continue to dominate people from all sectors of society. So I would say that one of the main reasons why we still have wars, we still have people trying to control each other, to say that they know better, so they should be the leader of this and that, it's in the end because of all these narcissist aspects, because the child within, many times abused, and many times abused and not looked upon by ourselves, because this task is ours, people. We have to pay attention to our inner characters, let's say, including the hurt child within. So Joanna says that this occurs because of the false concept that well-being also is the absence of concerns, responsibilities, and illnesses, which predisposes to the loss of identity of the essential objectives of existence, replaced by the pleasure of physiological immediacy. Wow, let's think about that. So Joanna says that suffering is found in the world because the spirits who inhabited it remain in a period of ethical moral development in which pain is a psychological necessity. Unfortunately, we all would love not to feel pain anymore, so let's struggle to develop, as we are doing here, to reflect upon all these concepts, so that we can go on and to a next step of evolution of our consciousness. So she says to do well so as not to suffer, to fulfill one's duties in order not to be penalized, and to work for the progress of society in order to enjoy benefits, have become a transfer of the ancestral God fear through self interested business, through which God repays in blessings all that is good and severely punishing when evil is done. So let's talk a little bit about good and evil. So Joanna says that evil and good are relative and cannot have an absolutist conceptualization character, not at this point of our consciousness, in view of their own meanings. This allows the discernment of good actions as fruitful for those who practice them, due to the satisfaction of practicing them, and not only for the personal interests at stake. He who carries perfume is impregnated by it, and the same happens to he who carries decay. I think this is such a beautiful sentence and image to connect with, right? If we carry perfume, if we can smell it in ourselves and in others, okay, like in this beautiful metaphor that Joanna is calling us to reflect upon, we get impregnated. We know, and we know, right, that we are at peace with our consciousness, because as Spiritist knowledge says, where are the laws of God? And the Spirit's answer, Allan Kardec, in man's, in humanity's consciousness. Okay, so we all have in our imago Dei, that is synonymous to, so our God image within, synonymous to the self, capital S, or higher self for those who prefer. So we all have this laws of God, let's say, this higher consciousness that can illuminate our path towards evolution. But we have to listen to it, learn how to listen to it, right? And be impregnated by this perfume and recognize in our fellow human being this perfume. So, but Joanna calls us to pay attention at the same, and the same thing happens, the smell of decay. We have to pay attention to this smell of decay in ourselves, in others. So this is the shadow aspects within ourselves and others. But let's not point fingers to the shadow of others, because in psychological terms, this is projection. I will always project whatever is within myself that I don't want to look. So all the shadow aspects are going to be projected onto others. So that's why we have to pay attention and to learn. It's not very good to smell decay, right, people? But we have to learn. If I don't like the smell, great. I can change it to a beautiful perfume, but I have to understand how to do it. And I have to, and this is all through self-knowledge, okay? So Joanna says that this part of the text is so beautiful. She talks about emotional health and psychological meaning. So she says, when one operates in terms of emotional health and psychological meaning, deep satisfaction rises from the unconscious and takes over the conscious reality. This stimulates the continuation of behavior and full attunement with the Imago Dei, our God image, expanding the radius of thought in the direction of God, of the creation of the source of love and light. So, of course, it was not me who made this mandala. I asked for the person, my daughter, who helped me do this PowerPoint presentation because I was kind of with a lot of things to do and classes to give in this period. But I think it's great because even the IA, the artificial AI, sorry, artificial intelligence, um, made a mandala here. I didn't ask for it, but it's great. And in a synchronicity, I was giving class to some people about mandalas, and in psychological meaning of wholeness and healing of the mandalas. So you see, the artificial intelligence made emotional health the mandala, so balanced feelings and responses, psychological meaning, understanding purpose and significance, and we have a lot of scientific research about that. I will put in the WhatsApp group some of it, some beautiful study that Harvard Medical, I think Harvard University is not only medical, is doing these days about human flourishing. Okay, I'll put later in the WhatsApp group. So, divine connection, alignment with higher purpose, and conscious reality, awareness of present experience. And look at that. I think this paragraph is so beautiful. So, Joanna is talking about purification and the kingdom of heaven. So, just going a little previously, when in the last image, Joanna was saying that all this stimulating, this search for just saying emotional health and psychological meaning uh, makes us so full attunement with the Imago Dei, expanding the radius of thought in the direction of God, of the source of creation. So she says, in this purification of the divine archetype itself, of course, here she's not talking about the ultimate reality, the creator, God, but she's talking about divine archetype within ourselves. So our ancient, the archetypes, right? As Jung says, the footsteps of God within the psyche, right? So we have the main archetype, this ancient form, let's say, within the psyche, is the Imago Dei, right? Is the God image, the archetype of wholeness and unity within the depths of our psyche. So Joanna says, in this purification of the divine archetype itself, a channel is established with the absolute cause. Joanna's words, absolute cause. And let's pay attention of how many ways she calls the creator, she calls God. Here she's calling him, her, whatever, God, the absolute cause. Okay, I think it's so beautiful because she's teaching little by little the many, many ways to understand, but not intellectually, people, but to feel God, understand with our hearts, right? So she says it's this all this purification of the divine archetype itself establishes so a channel with the absolute cause, providing the conquest of the kingdom of heaven, therefore non-suffering. I think this is one of the sentences. We all love Joanna's teachings, but this is one of the sentences that we should, copy and look upon like almost every morning, like in a mantra, like in a meditation, because it has so many or so much spiritual information and so many images that can connect us and open channels for us, okay, in our psyche for this purification and finding the kingdom of heaven that we all know by this point is within and not outside of us. So even a discomfort, Joanna says, a loss, harm of one nature or another no longer have the meaning that is attributed to them, taking into account what is essential for the psyche, which are the aspirations of what is essential for the psyche. So the aspirations of the beautiful, the almost unattainable, the transcendent. So Joanna says that the source of worldly suffering, okay, she says the sufferings in the world therefore flow from the existential dramas of unbalanced individuals in need of affection who have strayed from the flock, waiting for the shepherds to leave the other sheep to look for them. It is in this conflictive phase that the sleeping hero assumes the posture of the prodigal son who leaves for a distant country, whose unusual experiences often transform into sufferings that bring him back to the lap of the merciful Father who awaits him, always watching the road he must travel on his return home. So here Joanna is talking about Jesus' parable of the prodigal son. Okay? And we all know, and for those who don't know, please go there, Google it or whatever in the internet. The parable, the beautiful parables, a metaphor of the prodigal son that Jesus brings to us, helping us understand the way that we kind of lose ourselves. Okay, we live for distant countries, searching for illusions, right? Pleasures, and actually kind of get lost from ourselves, not from others, not from judgment of others, from father and mother judgment, but from our own, you know, spiritual path of development, from our own judgment, our merciful Father within, the self, capital S, okay, who is waiting for the ego, let's say, that here Joanna says the sleeping hero, right? Because it is the hero within. The archetype of the hero is the archetype of developing consciousness of our ego consciousness in this life that has to learn, have the experiences, even suffer if it, if it should be, but to learn and to help to go through the process of individuation and help the self, our higher self, our spirit, evolve and help ourself to fulfill the task that it has chosen to do, the learning that it has chosen to do when it was in the spiritual realms. So here Jonah talks about suffering as talent, and she says, on the other hand, suffering can be considered as talents. Remember the parable of the talents? So here the suffering can be considered as talents that are granted to dignify their possessors, who must apply them in a productive way, maintaining resignation and courage. This happened in the myth of Job. When tested and despoiled by divinity, he remained totally faithful and trusting in him. He loved God not for what he had received from him, but for the effect of his fatherhood. Okay, so Job had this consciousness of what the fatherhood of God meant for all of us. So it was a test of faith, right? We all know that by now. So, betting within Satan, that other archetypal myth of the human unconscious, God decided to test Job to prove that he was faithful to him, and the servant became worthy of receiving the reward that led him back to peace and the joy of living. Okay, so this God, naturally anthropomorphic in the Jungian view, is tremendous. In the numinous experiences, the experience of the connection to the sacred, that are mysterious, tremendous, and fascinating. There are mystery, something overwhelming and fascinating, okay, for the ego. So this God, naturally anthropomorphic at that point in the Jungian view, is tremendous due to the terrifying aspect he assumed when in his antinomy he presented his other face, that of mercy and love, rewarding the one who had remained trusting even when suffering had reached almost unbearable limits. Okay? So this is very important because Jung, I don't know if maybe some of you have read, but he has this book, Answer to Job, where he analyzes this part of the Bible, okay, and in psychological terms. And John is talking about that, but let's see a little bit more. Just wanted to tell you that the myth of Job, okay, and in psychological terms, is kind of the test. And for Jung, the transformation of the God image, okay? And Joanna is telling this antinomy, this paradox, it's the same as paradox, antinomy, we could say, is helping us to go from one point of view, and it's kind of our psychological immaturity to think of the creation of an anthropomorphic God that it's very unmerciful, let's say, and terrifying, and and it's saying that you have done bad things, you are guilty of this and that, you must suffer. So that's one of perception of our, of course, when we are still psychologically immature, that we project onto God these aspects of judging, being judgmental, and saying that we need to be punished and things like that. And all of this transforms in Answer to Job. And for Jung, it was kind of a preparation in our psyche, an evolution to the new God image, where this God within, but and of course the way that our God image is synonymous of the self, but also the way that we understand wholeness, that we understand oneness, the ultimate reality. Okay, so the God image also shows the level of our consciousness, psychologically speaking and spiritually speaking. So in the Answer to Job, in psychological terms, we are leaving that kind of infantile way of perceiving God and to evolve towards this God of mercy and love that it's in the New Testament. So let's take a look at some more of these concepts. So, in this way, Jonah says, the resilience of many individuals is understandable, who finding themselves under unspeakable torments and afflictions remain confident and sure of divine mercy, certain that they are never abandoned. So she talks about martyrs of all times, those who suffered for their beliefs yet remain faithful, like the spirit of our dear Joanna de Angelis, that we have been talking about her previous incarnations, and all Holocaust victims, so those who endured unimaginable suffering yet maintained their dignity, and all of them gave Job's testimony. They maintain the self in the individual fragmentation of the divinity itself. It's the same of saying, understanding that we are sparkles of this source that we call God, harmonizing themselves and remaining in connection with God, with the source. So here Joanna is talking in this antinomy of God. So she's talking about the Old Testament, as we said. God is merciless and likes to be feared. So our kind of childish, sorry, but we are talking about psychological terms, so we need to talk in psychological terms. So it's kind of our childish way of perceiving God. And going in the New Testament, so in psychological terms, God is merciful and understanding, desiring only to be loved in the condition of father and mother, let's say. So this is the transmutation of evil. Evil, says Joanna, will not disappear from the world from one moment to another, because it is the inverse of good, to be transmuted, acquiring the qualities of the latter. Thus, even in the high of bitterness, failures, afflictions, and all that the evil that generates suffering signifies, there is a trace of light in the middle of darkness of our shadows, presenting the solution, proposing the reunion of with God. Isn't that beautiful? So here John is asking us to pay attention to the ambivalence of God in the psyche. Okay. So she says, in addition to the consciousness of the being in the deep psyche, God temporarily presents himself in this ambivalent aspect. Fear and love, which attend by the discerning self, will merge into love in the process of inner illumination, leaving the existing shadow. So the artificial intelligence made also here a mandala talking about, because we are talking about fear, the terrifying aspects of the divine, shadow, the darkness to be transcended, and together, mandala is all about unification, unity, integration. Sorry, so they are also together with love, the merciful aspect of the divine, and illumination, the merging of aspects through inner growth. And Joanna says, sorry, a little water here. When one understands suffering as a need to understand the ego with all its masks including that of the apparent good, the tragic and the destitute become the foundation for the construction of human reality in its divine and transcendent sense. This is possible because the being itself is indestructible, it is immortal. Then you can understand why it's so bad, it's so hurtful to us, it's so unhealthy, the materialistic point of view in life. And I'm sorry to say, also as a MD, the materialistic science, let's say, people that keep on looking at nature, because science is all about understanding, thinking with reason about nature and the psychic part of nature. So it's all what Allan Kardec did. He used the scientific method of his time to decodify, to all the messages that were coming from spiritual realms. And through science, but the science of the spirit, then we are evolving to a new paradigm. We are expanding our consciousness and we are understanding ourselves as indestructible and immortal beings, as Joanna is calling us to pay attention. So she says that about the power of prayer, okay, that as a valuable contribution to victory in this test of evolution, prayer provides the capture of powerful energies that give resistance to the transitory struggles that are in charge of eliminating the successive layers of primitivism and wild passions in dominance, diluting them to the core of the Imago Dei. Beautiful. So, prayer means communication with God through optimistic and confident thinking. And then she talks about different meanings of suffering. And she says that suffering holds different meanings for different people, serving as a great misfortune for some and a higher good for others. So misfortune for some, because when suffering is seen as punishment, injustice, or meaningless pain to be avoided at all costs. And for others, suffering becomes a catalyst for spiritual development, character building, and deeper understanding, so for growth. The difference, Jonah says, lies not in the suffering itself, but in how it is perceived and integrated into one's life narrative. And there's that beautiful sentence by Jung when Jung says, I'm not what happened to me. I am what I decide to do with what happened to me. So it is often surprising, Joanna says, to see moral resilience on certain individuals who, put to the test of unspeakable suffering, remain calm and stoic, as happened during the Holocaust of the Jewish people in the merciless clutches of the Nazis. Many of those victims, after their release, instead of letting themselves be consumed by hatred against their tormentors, sought, or tormentors, sought to help them and work for the rebirth of the country, and give meaning and purpose to the experience, like Viktor Frankl, for instance, that we all know. Okay? So, Joanna says, when questioned by, many of them said, Hatred will not bring back to us our loved ones who were murdered, the joy stolen, the health vilified, the life lost. Only through love can we demonstrate that no physical, political, or social force is more powerful than our trust in God. This sentiment was expressed by many Holocaust survivors, Joanna says, when questioned about their lack of hatred toward their former tormentors. And then she brings to us the story of a lager guy and she says among many of those survivors, one named Alegre guy, I don't know, I'm quite sure if that's how we pronounce it, who had suffered horrors in Auschwitz extermination camp, continued to smile and gently help the people who had forgotten him and those who abjectly had put him through hideous process of cruelty. So his story exemplifies how some individuals can transcend even the most extreme suffering through spiritual resilience and the power of forgiveness. I heard someone say something. Do you want to ask something, Fabricio? Is everything okay with the PowerPoint?
Yep. You can carry on,
Okay,
and
carry on, Anahy. Okay. So then Joanna talks about the crisis of faith in suffering. And then she says, despite those reflections, there are emotionally fragile individuals who, linked theoretically to any religious denomination, when faced with suffering, feel defrauded and anguished ask, why does God allow this to happen to me? Where is God who does not come to my rescue? Is there really a God? Their concept of the divinity is magical, going back to the primary period in which the archetype of the miraculous predominated in their unconscious. So she says that the magical concept of divinity involves a God who resolves everything, preventing the occurrence of illuminative experiences. It also includes the belief that conquests could be achieved through the trafficking of miracles, through gratitudes, tithes, and material donations. Patients with this deficient emotional structure still abound, unfortunately, Jana says, in society today. True faith, she says, one that is rational and is based on the experience of immortality, is the only carrier of moral resilience to confrontations that are expressed as loneliness, suffering, silence, expectation, anguish. When any of these psychological phenomena that produce pain befall the bearers of spirituality or emotional maturity, they have a reservoir of transcendent strength that they draw from God. Okay. So when Jonah talks about transcendent strength, she says that with transcendent strength drawn from God, individuals can overcome the most dangerous situations and the most distressing, harmful events. It is easy to verify this fact in the sick for whom one prays. There are many research about that, scientific research who, without knowing about this contribution of strangers, manage to show improvements in the organic problems they experience. And she says that the power of praying in healing, when she talks about that, she says the sick person, when we pray for people, as you guys are doing, and I try to join whenever I can, in the group of prayers, okay? This beautiful group of prayers that Fabrizio, Lolita, and many others are doing. So the sick person shows improvement without knowing about even without knowing about the prayers. They acquire more resignation, face the situation in a healthy way, and recover more quickly. The effects are much more immediate and therapies become more efficient. It is understandable that these people, given the faith and mental strength they demonstrate, stimulate the neurons to produce the substances that provide rebalance, health, and harmony. And I can testify for that humbly, but from everything that I've studied in medical field. So, just for us to finish, because we want to do the beautiful therapeutic visualization. So, Jesus, in his approach to healing, when Jesus was invited to heal someone, he always asked, "Do you believe that I can heal you? Or do you want me to heal you?" In this way, it gave rise to the patient's own contribution to the recovery process, producing neuropeptides responsible for organic, emotional, and even psychic reconstruction, making them receptive to the force that emanated from him. And he would also say, when after he healed, of course, after he helped the person to produce self healing, we could also say that, as Joanna is asking us to reflect upon. But he also said, "Now go and don't sin anymore," because he was talking to people that, of course, didn't have any idea about the shadow aspects of our psyche. So he had to talk in the way that people of that time would understand. And here she's asking us to remember about the action of will. And she says that the action of will, therefore, in any area of behavior is relevant as it gives rise to the production of neurocommunicators that promote health. So, will is intentional mental focus and renewal, continued improvement and growth. Neurocommunicators, chemical messengers in the brain, and health, physical and mental well being. And just to remember that healthy religious faith, Joanna says, healthy, well-directed religious and well-directed religions faith also acquires and offers meaning to human existence, encouraging the believer in the pursuit of the commitments that embrace. It dignifies individuals with the efforts they undertake to be always better and numinous because of internal dispositions aimed to help to happiness. I will stop share now because otherwise we are not we'll have time for our visualization, and I will put everyone in the WhatsApp group, Fabrizio, the PowerPoint presentation so that people can watch later on. Okay? See you later on.
Okay. So what I would do then, I will say goodbye to all the ones that is going to be listening to this recording. Just a reminder that our next meeting will be on the 28th of September after the Congress, and I hope to see many of you there. And thanks for listening. Bye for now.